I'm here now with John Stone, who is a scientist who worked a long time for the Canadian government as an expert on climate change. John was also a member of the International Panel on Climate Change and now lives in Ottawa, where he's an adjunct professor at the local university. John, thanks a lot for agreeing to do this interview this morning. I'll probably start by asking you that we're here in Prague, and it's not the first time you're in Prague, not even the second or the third or the fourth time. You've been in Prague many, many times. Maybe you can tell us how come you have such a close connection to this city?
Oh, Prague is almost like a second home to me. I spent a year here at the Czech Academy of Sciences in 1972. I had a postdoctoral fellowship, and I fell in love with the city. And I came back virtually every year. I eventually married a Czech lady, and it's become a second home with lots of family and lots of friends here.
Looking back on how Prague developed, I mean, you had the chance of seeing Prague in regular intervals. What do you think, how has Prague developed over the last 40 years?
Well, it certainly looks much smarter than it used to. But if you love Prague, in '72, you didn't see the dirt so much. Now, of course, you notice with all the fresh paint and the renovations, it just looks so much smarter and so much prettier. But it's just a beautiful city. I was walking around yesterday, and I appreciated more and more how lovely this city is. Of course, there's a big difference that I've noticed is the number of cars in the city. I had a car when I lived here in 1972, and I mean, the traffic was very light. There was no problem finding a parking space anywhere. That's not the case today. The roads are jammed, packed with cars. You can't find a parking space anywhere. Cars parking on the pavement beside the road and everywhere. And so that's been a big change.
Coming back to maybe your role as a scientist who's worked in the area of climate change for many, many years, Prague is a city like many others. It's a capital city, and capital cities, like all the regions in the world, face climate change. But maybe you can tell us what are the specifics about cities when it comes to climate change?
Well, first of all, you have to accept that climate change is real and it's happening now. And we have evidence that the temperatures have already increased, extreme events have got more frequent and more severe, and lots of other changes that we can attribute to changes in the climate that are as a result of our actions, particularly the burning of fossil fuels. What makes cities special is that in addition to the climate change, which is a global effect, you have what we call the urban heat island effect in cities. And that is that cities are themselves warmer than the countryside around them. And there are good reasons for this, and we understand them fairly well. And it's because the city has got a lot of roads and buildings which absorb and retain heat. And so typically cities are some 5 degrees or more warmer than the countryside around them. So this urban heat island effect exacerbates the global warming, the climate change that is happening all over the world. And why is this a problem? Well, basically, at least 3 things. First, because of the heat. We've seen it particularly this summer in Ottawa, where I live, day after day of temperatures of 30 degrees and above. And that puts a great strain on people, particularly old people, young people, and people who are weak. You may remember that in, I think, 2003, there was a very severe heat wave in Europe, in France, Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, and the like. And it is estimated that there were some 40 to 50,000 additional deaths as a result of the heat. Mostly because the strains on particularly older people. So these heat waves can be a killer. So we're not only facing the increase of temperatures that is a global result of our burning of fossil fuels, but also in the cities we're seeing an additional warming because basically the way we build and design our cities. Lots of dark surfaces that absorb and retain the heat.
You've mentioned problems which cities face in the summer with heat waves. Now, one of the problems Prague faces, especially, but not only in the winter, is smog. Prague has suffered from smog this winter, like many other winters. And the mayor of Prague, for example, has unsuccessfully asked people to stop riding their cars or driving their cars in the winter. But maybe you can tell us what smog does in terms of climate change.
Well, yeah, I mean, smog. First big problem is air quality and the effects on people's health of breathing and the like. I must say, when I lived here in 1972, of course, almost everything was heated by coal, and the smog levels were much higher than I think they probably are today, because you use natural gas rather than coal for heating houses, and you don't have quite the same industrial factories as you used to have. But of course, one of the bigger contributions to smog is motor cars, particularly if you've got a badly tuned engine. You often see this with trucks, lorries, that they're diesel ones particularly that are badly tuned, and they emit these very small particles that, together with changes in other compositions of the atmosphere, give rise to this smog. So clearly, if you want to help to control that after you've replaced the use of coal by natural gas or something much cleaner fuels, you've got to concern yourself with cars and making sure that they are, it's emitted as low amounts of these pollutants as possible, which means, as a first start, in making sure the engines are well tuned, which of course is going to benefit you because that means the engine's going to burn more efficiently, and you're not going to have to spend quite as much money buying buying fuel for the cars. But also, the transition away from the now 100 or plus year history of the internal combustion engine, and instead of using gas, petroleum, petrol, now using the possibility of hybrid or pure electric cars, which of course don't have the same emissions.
You've just mentioned electric cars. We're now in the middle of the European Mobility Week, and the city of Prague has chosen to, as a way of presenting future mobility and future transport, to propagate or to push the idea of electric cars, because it is claimed that they drastically lower emissions locally. Do you agree with this view, or maybe what are the advantages and maybe the disadvantages of electric cars?
Well, I mean, by and large, I think they have overwhelming advantages. But it does depend on where they derive their electricity. If that electricity is derived from burning of coal or other fossil fuels, clearly the environmental footprint of an electric car is quite high. Whereas if your battery in your electric car is charged from solar cells, windmills, or any of those such energy sources, then the environmental footprint of your electric car is much less. So it very much depends on where the electricity comes from. Of course, building cars, like building anything, has its own environmental footprint.